The Niners have some of the deadliest weapons across the entire league, whether it be on offense or defense. So in the upcoming videos, I want to go over some of these crazy weapons they have before training camp. And in today's video, I want to go over a player that you guys voted for as the best wide receiver on San Francisco. And that guy is Brandon Aiyuk. So recently, I asked you guys who you think the best receiver is on San Francisco. And you guys responded Aiyuk 67% of the time on 2.1 thousand votes. Even the best football player of all time speaks about Brandon Aiyuk and his skill set he has for the game. And if you guys don't know who I'm talking about, Jerry Rice recently spoke about Brandon Aiyuk's route running, and this is what he had to say. I think it was his route running. He's probably the best route runner with the 49ers. Look at Debo. He's doing more with bubble screens and stuff like that. I think when it comes down to actually him running routes, Brandon is so much better. And this isn't a way to talk poorly about Deebo Samuel, but more to highlight Brandon Aiyuk as a pure wide receiver. He's honestly the best one San Francisco has. And in this video, I hope to break down Brandon Aiyuk a little bit more deeply. But before we jump right into the video, it would mean a ton to me if you liked and subscribed. Thank you guys so much. Coming into the NFL, Aiyuk was impressive, whether you look at his production or his pure athleticism. But let's look at his physical attributes first. Coming into the NFL, Aiyuk was 6 foot, weighed 205 pounds, had 33.5-inch arms, and he ran his 40-yard dash in a very respectable 4.5 seconds, and his 10-yard split in a blistering fast 1.52 seconds. In comparison, Deshaun Jackson, one of the fastest wide receivers of all time, ran his 10-yard split in 1.50 seconds. And for me, I think this is a much more important time than the 40-yard dash. It's very rare, even for wide receivers, just to run 40 yards straight down the field. But that quick motion that Brandon Aiyuk has is very important, especially coming in and out of his routes, which Jerry Rice highlighted in that quote I mentioned earlier. So now that we understand Brandon Aiyuk's athletic profile a little bit more deeply, we can dive into his football career and understand what type of player he is. And while he's a former first-round pick, his football career always hasn't been smooth sailing. Aiyuk was born in Rocklin, California, and grew up in Reno, Nevada, where he attended Robert McQueen High School and played wide receiver, defensive back, and return kicks. He was named first team All-Northern Nevada and honorable mentioned All-State as a senior. While Aiyuk had these mentions and played quite well in high school, he wasn't heavily recruited. So this was the first obstacle Aiyuk needed to overcome. He needed to have faith in his skills, and did he? Aiyuk began his collegiate football career at Sierra College, and as a freshman, he caught 29 passes for 573 yards and 5 touchdowns. He was named All-Big 8 Conference. He was also named a junior college All-American his sophomore season after recording 60 receptions for 960 yards and 14 touchdowns, while also returning 11 kickoffs for 418 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also didn't stop there. He returned punts that year, 14 punts, 313 yards, and a touchdown. Crazy numbers. But what's maybe more mind-boggling is what he did his first 2 years of his college career. He finished his junior college career with 2,499 all-purpose yards and 21 touchdowns. That's wild. From 2016 to 2017, that means he was getting over 1,200 yards per year. So with these crazy numbers, many teams must have been looking at Aiyuk as the next number 1 wide receiver, right? Well, actually, that wasn't the case. Aiyuk had offers from Colorado State, Kansas, Tennessee, and Alabama, but ultimately he chose Arizona State because it was one of the only schools that chose him to be a wide receiver and not purely a return specialist, or even recruiting him to switch him over to the defensive side of the ball. And I think this once again highlights the inadequacies of scouting programs across both college and the NFL levels. They passed on Brandon Aiyuk probably mainly because he was a junior college guy, even though he has the athletic profile and put up ungodly numbers in his junior college days. But with that being said, I bet Arizona was happy they didn't overlook Brandon Aiyuk because he continued to do ungodly things for them. Aiyuk was able to actually remain productive despite transferring from a lower level college. In 2018, he put up 474 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had kick returns and punt returns during this year. The following year in 2019, this was really his breakout year. He had 65 receptions and 1,192 yards and 8 touchdowns. He also was impressive in his kick returning game, averaging 31.9 yards a kick return and even had 1 touchdown from a punt return. So this is the time where scouts had to dive a little bit deeper into Brandon Aiyuk's game and see exactly where he was going to be drafted. His draft prediction was rounds 1 or 2, and his NFL comparison was Robert Woods. So some of Brandon Aiyuk's strengths was his ability to just feast off man coverage. He would make guys look silly at times because of his extremely long limbs. He has the ability to act like he's going one way and then break extremely quickly the opposite way, and guys just can't keep up with it. He's also a first down maker. If you target him, chances are he's not just going to get 1 or 2 yards, he's going to try to fight and go hopefully all the way to a touchdown. He has the ability to elude so many tackles on the film. But if those were his strengths, what were his weaknesses going into the NFL? Well, they saw him as not necessarily the most physical wide receiver, more of a finesse wide receiver, and needed to add physicality to actually be productive in an NFL offense. Also, he only had average vertical separation and needed to get stronger when man coverage was draped across him. But Kyle Shanahan, not one to pick up a crazy talented wide receiver, saw Brandon Aiyuk sitting there and had to actually go trade up for him and picked him in round 1 with pick 25. And so far, he's lived up to it and then some. From 2020 to 2022, Brandon Aiyuk has been impressive with San Francisco. His receiving total has continued to increase every year, showing that Brandon Aiyuk has carried over the improvement you've seen since his junior college days. And that's the thing about Brandon Aiyuk. He'll get better and better and better. Even if you put him in a doghouse, he'll find his way to become the leader of that doghouse and then break out of that doghouse. Because last year in 2022, he put up some real pro numbers with his first 1,000-yard receiving year and 8 touchdowns. So you would think Brandon Aiyuk would be satisfied with a 1,000-yard receiving season. But here's the thing, he's not. He said that's just the start recently when he was speaking to the press, and then highlighted that he has a lot more things coming. And I love this confidence from a wide receiver who I actually believe. I think if he was on most offenses across the entire NFL, he probably could put up 1,500 yards receiving. So now that we've talked about Brandon Aiyuk's football career up to this point, this is where we need to look forward and look at what he's possibly capable of this upcoming year. Here's the thing, I expect Brandon Aiyuk to even be better than last year. And this is for a couple of reasons. The first and most important reason is that Brandon Aiyuk continues to work his tail off during the offseason, and these improvements show during OTAs, and then training camp is right around the corner, and I'm assuming that we'll continue to see Brandon Aiyuk taking leaps in his progression. But there's more to it than just that. Aiyuk also finds himself next to a new revitalized Deebo Samuel. Last year, Deebo said he was in terrible shape and played pretty badly. And this offseason, there's been plenty of clips of Deebo just going crazy. But you don't even have to just rely on Deebo. You have George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey looks like a completely different beast this offseason. Ultimately, for me, when you look at pure wide receiver, Brandon Aiyuk is one of the best wide receivers the Niners have had in more than a decade. And that's very important for the NFL that's moving more and more pass heavy every year. And if I were Kyle Shanahan and the front office for the Niners, I would consider bringing back Brandon Ayuk long term. He's a better investment than a guy like Deebo Samuel, who frankly gets injured a ton because of the way he plays the game. He's not a pure wide receiver like Jerry Rice mentioned, but he does a whole lot more on those bubble screens, which ultimately leads you getting hit a whole lot more by bigger guys like linebackers. Whereas a guy like Brandon Ayuk plays on the outside and really just has to deal with the lighter DBs hitting him. And that's what causes careers to be able to be extremely long like Jerry Rice's. And while I don't like to compare Jerry Rice to Brandon Ayuk, I do think Brandon Ayuk has the potential to be a continual all-pro wide receiver. So with all that being said, now I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about Brandon Ayuk as a wide receiver? Is he a potential number 1 wide receiver, and should he replace Deebo Samuel if the Niners have to make that decision? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. It would also mean a ton if you liked and subscribed. Thank you guys so much for watching.